Welcome to Disruptive Successor, a show for next generation leaders in family businesses and entrepreneurs who want to disrupt the status quo and take their existing business to a whole new level. We all know that what got us here isn't going to get us there. This show will provide inspiration, advice, and resources to help you create massive impact. This podcast is sponsored by myself, Jonathan Goldhill, and my company, the Goldhill Group, where we provide coaching for growing companies. I'm Jonathan Goldhill, and my purpose is simple: to guide entrepreneurial leaders in family businesses towards more freedom and fulfillment. I want entrepreneurs to get clarity around the changes that will make them and their businesses more successful so they can experience the same freedom I've enjoyed in my life. Our proven practices challenge business owners to think differently about their business and how they're running it, and quite literally become game changers in our clients' companies. Learn more at thegoldhillgroup.com website, where you can schedule your free strategy session. Hi, it's Jonathan Goldhill, and welcome back to another episode of the Disruptive Successor Show. Today's going to be a really special show for me because I have a friend of mine that I went to business school with in 1989, and he's been in his family's business for all that number of years, just about, and I'm going to let him tell his story. So Jeffrey Jappa is the CEO and I think currently president of JMC Wood, formerly Japco Manufacturing, and before that, it was Jappa Manufacturing Company. Jeffrey, do I have that right?
Jappa Construction Company is what my dad started it as when I was a small kid.
All right. So take us back to when your dad started the company. What's the history on it? When did he start it? Maybe why did he start it? What was it all about?
So my dad, he was a handyman, and so he had a little construction company. And I guess after a while, he decided that he, didn't like the job, project management and, helping people fix their houses and do upgrades. And so he decided he wanted to try to become an industrial manufacturer. So he did some research and stumbled on something called lamination, which would be when a company would take some wood-like laminates. In our case, it was made out of vinyl and paper, and then you would roll that onto full sheets of particle board, MDF, and sometimes plywood. And then this type of product was used in RTA furniture, which is called ready-to-assemble furniture. Also used way back when in speaker box manufacturing. And so in 1972, he bought this machine and he went into business inside another factory who became his sole customer. At the time, I was 12 years old, and my dad was doing this at nights because during the day, that company ran their business. And at night, my dad would come in and fire up the laminating line and laminate 400 or 500 sheets, which that company would use during the day. And so my dad was scrappy, and I guess tough to find help. So he had one key person. His name was Kenny. And then Kenny had a kid who was Kenny Jr. My dad had a kid named Jeffrey. And that we were the workforce. And so at about 12 or 13 years of age, I would come home from school and get in my dad's van, and we would drive 40 minutes and we would laminate sheets of board. And I remember I would mix glue. So I would get a bucket out. It was a 2-part epoxy and a stick and mix glue. I would also cut the sheets apart. So as they ran through the machine, The boards would be individual boards. The laminate would be continuous, and it would roll out, and the glue would be put on the board, and then the laminate would be put on top of the glue, and it run through some rollers and be flat. And then somebody had to take a knife and cut between the boards to separate the laminate, and then it would get stacked up. And so that's what I did, for a couple years. From there, my dad ended up moving out of that factory and going off on his own and finding some other customers. And so he was in the city of St. Louis. And during that period of time, I would work summers for him. And mostly it was a friend of mine and myself. It was the neighbor across the street, and he could drive. So my dad would kind of teach us what needed to be done. He would run people during the day, but he always had a little bit of extra stuff he needed done at night. And so sometimes we'd go in and clean up. Other times we would actually run machines. And so I did that for quite a while. Then when I got into high school and started driving my own, I started doing some of the same things. I ended up running 2 or 3 people and on a night shift. And so I would come in. I had a high school buddy, and we would go into my dad's factory and work at night. One of the fond memories I had was my dad had a houseboat and on the Alton Lake, Mississippi River. And we worked at night, so we would get off early in the morning, and the boat was available. My dad was kind of a little crazy because he let a 16, 17-year-old son take that boat out on his own. And so we had a lot of fun getting off work and basically every day running out to the river and playing on his boat during the day, sleeping, and then doing it all over again.
So this is the makings of a great story, and a story that's so typical for the clients that I work with who are in family businesses, and they're a next generation leader. And as you know, I call them a disruptive successor because they take over the business with an endeavor to really change the way the business is being done and really take the business to a next level. And that just might look like putting more processes and procedures and systems and technology at a minimum. It might look like changing the products and services. But you and I both know, having spent a few years in business school and many years in business, that if your company's not growing, it's dying. And if you're not paying attention to what's going on out in the marketplace, talking to your customers, your potential customers, finding out what's going on in the competition, then, if you're not staying ahead of that, your business over time is going to become irrelevant. Because, if you had a business like one of my earlier guests from my earlier episodes, where they were basically like a paper supply and envelope. If you were in the envelope business today, you'd be out of business because people don't mail stuff so much anymore. So you've learned, and we're going to get into your story about how it's adapted over time. But I think what's really interesting is that, like so many other entrepreneurs that I work with, you spent your high school and early years kind of growing up in the family business and watching what your father was doing. And you had a sibling involved in the business as well, right? So when you were a kid, at what age do you think, can you remember that you were looking at your dad, the way he was running his business, and you were thinking like this isn't right, or this could be better, or when did the light bulb go off to think like, I have some ideas here that I think need to be injected into the business? And then, so that's my first question.
Right. So it's interesting. When you first started to ask it, what came to my mind is like, well, when did you know that you might want to do something like your dad?
Right.
And so I remember, I don't know, I was like 4 or 5 years old. My dad still had the Jappa Construction, and he had shirts with his Jappa Construction and his name on it. It was like like an old gasoline shirt with that patch, and it was red. And he also drove a blue van. And so it's really interesting because at like about 4 or 5 years old, I remember he bought me my own Jappa Construction shirt, and he
Uh-oh.
bought one of these little cars that you pedal with your feet. He painted it the same blue as his van. And so I knew pretty early on, or maybe he was grooming me pretty early on,
Yeah.
to be like him. And so I had a fascination with wanting to own and run my own business from a very young age, and actually knew that's what I was going to do. Um, as it turned out, the easiest path to getting to what my goals were over time, I learned, was really through my dad's business.
Hmm.
It's really tough to start stuff on your own and find ideas and money and capital. And so, when you got a goal of running and owning your own business, and there's one in the family, I realized that would be a good path. And
I mean, we went to business school together. We went to the
right,
entrepreneur program, and I
right,
remember we've laughed about,
right.
the great business plan you wrote, and you were going to get into the
Fast
healthy
food.
food, fast
Yeah,
food kind of
yeah,
a business. And I think you saw, and you went to work for
right.
a guy who was very successful. I mean, you worked for Tommy's Burgers,
I worked
which
for Tommy's. I
which
I,
which is
I
an
actually tried
institution in Los
Carl.
Angeles, right?
He's still around.
I think that'll always be around. I mean,
Too
that's
many Tommy's. That's what we used to call it.
exactly. It's the most unusually branded company because there was maybe 20 of these locations, and each
Right.
one was spelled a little bit different,
Yeah.
and nothing looked alike. It was kind of very interesting the way it was put together.
And I spent some time with Tommy and his right hand man, and there's some good stories there. He was a gambler, and so man, I just remember he would just count tons, and all Tommy did was show up, count the cash, and take it. go to
So,
go to the racetrack.
oh boy.
And I also had the pleasure of meeting Carl Karcher. You
Yeah.
know,
Yes.
and I worked, if you remember, Jonathan, at the USC Carl's Jr., and I was the weekend manager. And so during the football games, I was just pounding tons and tons of sales and burgers through there, and some of the leaders showed up of Carl's to try to understand how in the heck I could do so much volume. And I had an industrial engineering degree before I get to school. And to
Right.
me, it was just like a little factory.
Right.
To me, it was just a manufacturing. I'm
Yeah. That's
manufacturing
great.
fries and burgers. And so I set up systems and processes, and I'd never ran out of food. They're like, how come you never run out of food? And it's like, because I have this ordering system. And I explained it to them, and like, oh, wow, that's interesting. And my understanding was they were teaching my little ordering system, which was simple, to other people. So I always had an affinity for that. I fell in love, and I started having a couple kids, and it just became more difficult to raise capital and put in all the hours I needed to put in to do my restaurant dream.
And so, as I recall, because we've been good friends for so many years now, the there was always a thought about going into your dad's business, but it was like, wait a second, let me try some of my own things first. Let me follow my own path. And it meant moving back to St. Louis, which you were
Right.
living in Los Angeles and going to school here.
Right.
Um, and you met another successful entrepreneur, right? The guy who had the popcorn
Yeah, Bill.
franchises,
Yeah.
Bill Sanderson, as I recall. And
Yes.
so that, like, maybe that was going to lead to money and fulfilling your
Right.
dream. But so at some point, you recognized going back and going to work for your dad was going to be, maybe your path to success, and you had to probably throw your hat in the ring. What I mean to say is, you had to be humble to show up and work for your dad and know that, like, it's not your own show here. You got to
Right.
work for somebody else.
Right.
So was
Yeah. The
that around the time that you were thinking, like, okay, I'm going to go back and I'm going to make a big impact in this business. I'm
Right.
going to make some changes.
Right. The interesting thing about Bill Sanderson was he became my mentor. He had the popcorn thing, and then he saw my passion in fast food. And I don't know if you remember, but when I graduated, he approached me and he bought 5 big boy mall restaurants. And he asked me if I would come run them for him.
Right.
So I started running Bob's Big Boy. My oldest son, Miles' first word was Bob, not mom,
That's
not Bob. Because I slaved over those, and we turned him
right.
around very quickly, and he got a good ROI on that. And to go backwards a little bit, when I got out of high school, when I got out of college, I did work for Anheuser-Busch a little bit, McDonnell Douglas, and then I ended up working for my dad again. And I'll tell you, working for my dad was super, super difficult. I was never good enough, and I never got really good accolades from him. And even though I worked real hard, and I remember I wrote a computer program from scratch because I learned how to do that would manage his backlog, and it was just really tough. So I'll tell you, I ended up at MBA school, Jonathan, because I was in a quandary. I moved back. I was thinking of bringing my wife and back with me, and I had a child at the time. And I told her to hang back and let me go check things out with my dad before she moved. So I went back, and things just really did not go very well. And I was trying to figure out how not to hurt my dad and to get the hell out of there. And so I said, you know what? I'll get an MBA. I'll tell my dad that I've been working with him and I need more business sense, and I can see all these things he's doing that I don't understand, and I really feel like I need to, get an MBA. And then I researched, and UCLA was starting an entrepreneur program, but at the time USC was the #1 entrepreneurial program, and I chose that. So it's funny, I ended up at MBA school because I was trying to soft land not wanting to work with my dad.
Gotcha.
So it's funny
Interesting.
how the family
Yeah.
business
Yeah.
has played a part in who I am today in many ways besides the family business.
And so who was in that business? You said you spoke of Kenny earlier. Was
Kenny
he,
Knight, yeah.
and he was not
He
a
was
family
still there.
member.
No, not a family member,
But
still
the
there.
first employee, and
Yeah.
your brother was in the business, correct?
Later,
Okay.
yes.
Okay. Later. So,
So we take the timeline from there. So then
yep.
what ended up happening is around 1991, there was a big recession.
Yep.
I had graduated in 89. I worked for Bill Sanderson for 2 years with the Bob's Big Boy. And my dad had invested a lot of money in a new building and a brand new laminating line, which, by the way, that building and laminating line is now in my possession.
Mm-hmm.
And so he invested everything he had. He was very successful. He probably had $1 million in cash back in 91. And he decided to reinvest everything and buy a new line, a new building, and really launch the business. And at that time, his salesman kind of stole a bunch of business and started a like business, which that guy is still around and he still competes. And so my dad ended up getting super depressed. And when I would talk to him, he would just talk about he's thinking of shutting everything down. He can't take
Wow.
it anymore. My mom said he was just in bed every day, and other people were running it. And I said,
Give us a frame of reference. How many employees, maybe? How many
probably at that
millions?
time,
Like,
maybe 7 or 8,
so
9.
pretty small company, and he'd been at it
Yeah.
for like a few decades already at
Yeah,
this
yeah.
point.
And he was probably doing $1 million and I don't know. He's probably doing a couple $1,000,000 a year at that point.
Okay.
And then so what ended up happening is my wife was pregnant with our second child, and LA started to look to me like, man, this is a tough place to raise a family. And I had been raised in Missouri, and I went to public schools and really lush environment and not a lot of fast cars and fancy clothes. And
Right.
it was, I mean, people talk about the wholesomeness of the Midwest, and it's true. There is a wholesomeness in the Midwest and the values that that are possessed in that part of the country. And so I was looking for a way out of LA because I didn't think I could raise my family. I had done, a good job for Bill, but that didn't seem to be going anywhere. It's almost like you conquered that. Now what? And so I told my dad, hey, let me come back and give it a try. Before you think you're going to throw in the towel, let me come back and give me a shot at running it. So he decided to do that, and we agreed on a certain salary, and I moved my family back to St. Louis, and I was like 31 years old, and basically started drinking out of a fire hose because I literally took over the business at 31 and had to learn a lot of things very, very fast. My dad started doing his same antics, being a very difficult person to work for, like almost immediately cut my salary. He started doing all kinds of, things like we needed help. And so I had talked to him about maybe putting, a housekeeper on the payroll to help me, through my things at home because I wasn't at home at all. And so he said, yeah. And then 6 months later, he claims he never approved it. I mean, it just went on and on and on. He was really a bear. And
so Jeffrey, hold on a second.
yeah.
Do you think this was unique to your dad and how he was treating you as a parent, or was there something else going on here? Was he like, or was it like, hey, we don't have enough money. I need more money. And let's cut Jeffrey's salary and I'll take more out myself, or was it a little bit of both? I mean,
yeah, he was always, like I said, a really tough father. I mean, just to give you an idea, that man never told me he loved me in his whole life. He went to the grave not telling me he loved me.
Oh boy.
He would show me he loved me through, I'll be honest with you, a lot of it was through the business.
So teaching you, maybe mentoring you, or spending time with you.
Seeing good things. I could talk to him. I could relate to him. And so it's really funny because you got a kid. When you look back at it, you got a kid who wants his father's love, and it appears that the only way he can get his father's attention to try to get that love is through the business.
Yeah. So interesting. And by the way, just as a compliment and by contrast, you're all heart. You're a huggy kind of like, very friendly, warm. So what a different person you are than your dad. Amazing.
Exactly. And we learned a lot about that. I mean, I went to, as at USC, I took an, family business class with, John Davis, who was, I think he's still renowned, but he was, really up and coming back then. And we did an exercise, which basically he did it with siblings. So it's like if the first sibling's smart, the second sibling comes in, they're looking for their way to get attention. And so they become a troublemaker because smart's already taken. And I think that's the way a lot of us are.
Interesting.
With humans, I think a lot of us are like that. So, some people grow up with a certain disadvantage, and then, you say, I'm never going to be that way. That's I don't want to be treated like that. So I think that's what's helped me become who I am.
Fascinating contrast. I've never heard this theory that, one spot is already taken, like smart is taken. So troublemaker, that's available. I think that dynamic probably plays out in a lot of family businesses.
And in families. I mean, if
families, right.
To look at their siblings and start lining them up, what did the first one do, and what did the second, what did the third, and the baby comes along, and a lot of times the babies are hellions because that's what's left.
Right.
Well, these guys have done everything right, and they got so how am I going to get my attention?
Yeah.
And so as things progressed with my dad, when I came back, here's what I noticed almost immediately. So my dad he had a good niche, and he commanded good prices, and he made a lot of money. And what I started to notice was we were getting lots of inquiries. We weren't winning business. And I
Hmm.
started to look at his pricing and what he was doing. And I said to myself, I need enough cash to survive. And I don't necessarily need high margins. I need cash. And so the first thing I did, and I'll be honest with you, I've repeated this 2 or 3 times during my career when things have started to go, the wrong way. And that is lower my margin and win business. And
Interesting. Interesting.
and
Did you track your business in terms of percentage of one loss or conversion ratio, or do you
no, I
remember any of
never
that?
did. No, I
But you
wasn't
but you were
that.
winning more business. And so, I always coach my clients to be more premium pricing because, being the high volume, low price competitor, the Walmart strategy, let's call it,
Right.
very difficult to
It is.
operate unless you're very good, but in terms of efficiency. But that was one of your strengths as an industrial engineer was operational efficiency, I bet.
Yeah, that played a part in it. And at the end of the day, if you can't get the premium price, you got to do something.
Exactly.
Now, what's
Smart.
interesting
Right.
is I have tremendous success today
Hmm.
with premium pricing.
Yeah, I'm sure.
So I'm not saying that's the way
No, but that's
that
because you
wants
have
to
a
run their
product
company
now.
forever. But
Yeah,
if you're in survival mode,
right,
and you need cash. I mean, it boils down to you need cash, you need
right,
operating income,
right.
and you got to get it somehow. And so slowly I started to lower my prices and I won business. The other thing I noticed is when,
And let me just ask, you did not
yeah,
have a unique product at that time, I'm
no,
guessing.
in a
So
sense, I
today you
had a
have a unique
commodity.
product, so that's why you
Correct.
can get a premium price. Okay, just
Yeah.
clarification.
In a sense, I had a commodity product, although there weren't very many laminators in the United States. There
Right,
still aren't very many, but
right.
it's still kind of a commodity product, even today, if you're just going to laminate wood. So, but back then, I noticed that we could, win more. The other thing I started to notice is once I got people in the door, the type of business we were in was people didn't move once they reached a comfort level, and we're dealing with large products and freight issues, and there wasn't a lot of movement once you won a customer. So what I realized was I could bring people in with low prices, and then they would want, can you give me a little of this, and can you give me a little of this, and can you do this? And what I could do was slowly start creeping my margins up. So it
Right,
was almost like the loss leader philosophy.
right.
Little did I know it back then. I just was gutting it out every day.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what I realized. And then from there, we started to add value to, what we were doing in the business. So we started out with the laminating line and sheets of wood. Then we added a saw. Then my dad bought a CNC, and then we bought a molder. And so then that's when you can start saying, okay, I'm moving out of being a commodity and now I'm doing more value add, and I could start selling that value add. And even to this day, we still sell truckloads of laminated wood to people who don't have laminators and have their own equipment. But we have, also a very large business of laminating product for ourselves to convert into products that we can sell. For the longest period, we would, do parts to print, which helped a lot in raising our margins. And as you know, Jonathan, 2 or 3 years ago, I actually came out with my own product line, and that's that's really a key if you can do that, because now all of a sudden you're basically not giving away margin by people taking your product and then doing something with it and selling it to somebody else. And now I'm going to the end user and capturing all the margin. And I have unique products, so I can charge a lot for them. But as the business progressed, I think, you mentioned my brother. In so here's what happened. I took the company to somewhere. I took the company on a rocket ship. I probably came in when it was doing about 1.6 million, and by 1995 we were probably doing 5.5 million. Working very hard. lots more growth coming. We were hitting our stride, and my dad still was on the back seat. He started feeling better and coming in, and there was some pain there, but there was also a lot of good learning from him. I
Hmm.
learned a lot about cash from him. I learned a
Right.
lot about manufacturing. I learned, one of the biggest things I learned from my dad that I use to this day is collect that cash.
Hmm. Yeah,
Be
absolutely.
diligent with your AR. And to this day, I have the best turn on cash. My bank can't believe it, but that's because that's the way I was taught. And once you get the wherewithal, you just start telling people, I just can't do business with you if you don't
Right.
pay,
That's great.
you know.
That's super
So
smart
in
advice. So that's great.
1995,
Hmm.
my brother graduated college. He went to about 5 or 6 colleges, never worked a day in his life. I think he delivered pizzas for 2 days. Thought he was going to make a career in gambling, so he ended up in Vegas for a while and lost his ass there. And this is when he was coming back from Vegas, and my dad comes in one day and says, "I'm tired of Jason sitting around doing nothing and sleeping to noon. Um, I He's coming into the business." And I was like, "No, he's not coming into the business." And my dad insisted that he come into the business. So at some point in time, my brother was brought into the business, and he came and went as he pleased. He was a smart guy, and he did a few things well, but he just didn't have the passion, nor did he have the work ethic. And I would keep saying to him, "Hey, our name is on the door. So if your name's on the door, you better be here early and you better stay late. You're the guy everybody's looking for."
Sure.
And so over a period of time, the company got up to about $6.5 million in sales. And over a period of time, let's say from 95 to 98 or so, my brother wore me out and down. And I started to tell my dad that I needed stock in the company, that I needed to know that eventually this business would be mine. And what ended up happening, and it was just so tough for me, was it took me a long time, and he finally decided he would do that. But the caveat was this: my brother would get stock too.
Oh boy.
Oh boy.
And would he gift it to you or would you have to buy
He
it from him?
started gifting it to me.
Okay.
So what happened
And
was
you have no other siblings, correct? You don't have a,
I have a sister,
but okay. Was
never
she getting
involved in the
stock too?
business.
Was she getting stock as well?
No, never
Okay.
in the business, and
Okay.
never. I have my own opinions now about that. We can talk about that later if you want. But he so basically he started gifting us, and I had to make a deal with the devil. I wanted stock in the company because I deserved it, and thought eventually it could be mine. And so the caveat was I would get more stock and I would run the company. I would be the leader, but my brother was getting stock too. And I made a deal with the devil and said, okay. And what happened is 98, I just couldn't take it anymore. And I told my dad I asked him if I could buy him out, him and my brother out.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, fine. He gave me a number, like $1 million. And I said, okay, fine. So I went out and I actually was able to put together enough cash to give him 900,000, and he needed to take 10% back. And just about everybody, I mean, that's a
That's a
common
great
thing
deal.
right now. Right. And
Absolutely.
that's a
Oh yeah.
common thing right now.
Uh,
A lot of people invest, or banks or whatever. I mean, they want that owner to have some skin in the game.
mm-hmm.
They feel like if that guy, has skin in the game, he's going to make sure that, that he watches and coddles and make sure it goes. I mean, the funny thing is at that point in time, I was running the company completely. My dad couldn't run it,
Mm-hmm.
period.
Okay.
And so my dad turned me down. And after I raised all the money, I spent a lot of time, and it really frustrated me. And I really got angry. And so anyway, I remember it was like February of 1999, and I got in a heated argument with him. And I looked him in the face and I said, okay, Dad, You have to make a decision on who's going to run this company. It's either me or it's going to be Jason. And let me give you a little advice. Jason can't run this company.
Mm.
So your decision's pretty easy. And he looked at me and said, "You're fired." And I freaked.
Wow.
I was like, what? And that's what he did. So what was going on is my brother was going behind my back, and he was telling my dad that they didn't need me and yada yada. Other things that led to this was my dad started to say that my brother was going to get the same salary I got, even though he worked a third of what I did, even though I brought in all the business, blah 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 blah. So in 1999, I was gone, and
Amazing.
isn't that crazy? And
Crazy.
for 4 years, I went off and did my own thing. I helped other small businesses. I had good skills, and it's funny how many businesses I went in to help that their finances were just so messed up. It just almost, it was
Yeah.
just almost like I come in and you look at the books. I'm sure you do a lot,
Oh, I
Jonathan.
see it all the time with smaller
Yeah, I
companies
mean,
for sure.
entrepreneurs
I,
generally are not financially and accounting wise sound.
right. I don't remember that 4-year hiatus from your business. I remember you guys stopped talking, you and your dad,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
that was pretty bad. And you didn't talk to him much during those few
yeah.
years, as I recall.
That is
Uh,
true. I wanted to cut the grandkids out, and my wife was smart and told me that wasn't going to happen, and she was right. I'm glad
okay.
that anger didn't happen. Excuse me. So in 2003, and I'm talking to my dad, and one of the things I'd always tell my dad anytime I talk to him, which might have been at Thanksgiving or whatever. I mean, very rare, but we would talk. And one of the things I always said to him is, "Hey, I'm still interested in that business. So if anything changes, please make sure you call me."
Gotcha. And how
4 years,
did the business do during those 4 years?
I'm going to tell you. So in 2003, my dad calls me and he said, "Hey, I need your help. I've fired Jason. He's been stealing from the company."
Oh,
I'm like,
great.
"What?" "Yes." "Okay." I had a good friend of mine who was cognizant, and this guy helped me a lot because he was cognizant, I guess, of me wanting to please my dad and the whole love thing.
Hmm.
And I was kind of, I wasn't doing anything anyway, and that was my dream. So, sure, I was ready to come back. And so he was helpful for me because what he did is put guardrails and boundaries in. And he was talking to me regularly, call him my psychiatrist at the time. And he told me, "Okay, tell your dad you'll help him as a consultant and charge him $100 an hour." So that's what I did. I said to my dad, "Hey, I'll come back, help you as much as you want. It's $100 an hour. So tell me when you want me and I'll show up." So I did that for 6 months or so, and I helped him with a lot of things. I helped him clean up his books. And here's some of the things I found out. I found out that um, during the time I was gone, my brother brought in 0 customers.
Wow.
Business went from 6.8 million back to under 2 million. And my dad was losing like $10,000 a month. And that's when he called me. "Gee, you could have called me a little sooner, Dad."
Yeah.
Um, so I came back, and eventually, he would tell me he can't afford me and this and that and the other. And I said, "Well, then just let me buy the company. I'll be friendly with you. I'll go on payroll. You got to sell me the company." And so what am I going to pay for it? Whatever fair market price is, whatever I can, find money for. So I get an SBA loan. I got another little loan from what do you call one of these micro loan
Sure.
places to help
Yeah.
small businesses.
Uh-huh.
Put together the whole package, and I bought my dad out in November of 2004.
Okay.
And when I took over, we had a big company called Klipsch.
Yep.
We were doing 3.2 million. And a month or two before I was going to buy the place, Klipsch told us they were going to cease domestic operations, at the end of the year, right? And
Wow.
this is November. So my lawyer said I had to disclose it to the bank. So my dad and I put on a game face, and we went in and we told the bank, and we said it's no big deal. We win them, we lose them, everything's going to be fine. And we just went. And then I said to my dad, you owe me big time. I can't pay. We couldn't change the price because it would. So I said, you owe me on the
Why
back.
couldn't you change the price?
Because everything was laid out and ready to go.
Okay, gotcha. So,
and we were trying, if we changed the price, it would signal the bank that we have a problem. So I just told my dad, hey, I owe you 200 grand and I'm not going to pay you. So part of the deal is 200 grand. You'll never see the 200 grand.
Right.
Which he had problems with later. But anyway, so we went through the deal, and then it took me, so I got an 04. It took me to about four more years, to 2008, to get it back to 6.5 million. Wow. So the sad part is I lost 8 valuable years.
Yep.
And but nevertheless, I took it over and I made a lot of good moves, and I brought in new business, and I decided to go into different areas, sort of about this disruptive that you're talking. I was a huge one of those kind of guys. My dad's business was not going to survive the way it was. I knew it in 99 when he fired me, and I just kept my mouth shut because I wanted to buy it. Then I was going to change it. So when I left, nothing changed. When I came back, I executed my vision, and it was a good one. Basically, go after store fixture manufacturing industry.
That's great. So your business is doing great today. You Correct. Feel free to tell people what, how many employees, revenues, whatever you like. But there was an inflection point in your business that happened a few years ago, I think, where the revenues really just took off.
Correct.
What was that inflection point? How did you come to that inflection point? Did you create it? Did you bump into it? Did you, was it R&D? Was it like what precipitated it?
Correct. So I've always been an innovator and out of the box thinker. I think you know that, Jonathan, from our school days. I ran into Carl. He kind of told me to say, I remember you had so many ideas. and I kept that up. And so I just kept innovating and getting challenged and doing stuff. So probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 2016, somebody challenged me to make a subway tile without a subway tile. So the store fixture industry was looking for that look, but they couldn't put subway tiles on particle board or anything in fixtures because it would crack and move and blah, blah, blah. So they had a challenge and they wanted that look. And so I started to work on making a subway looking tile. And I came up with one that was really, really good. Very expensive, very good. And I couldn't sell it, but I showed it to everybody. And everybody said, that's the coolest thing, but nobody would buy it. Then a couple of years go by and we're in like 2018 and I get Ulta, the Ulta store chain, makeup chain. They liked it. They wanted it. And we started producing it for them. Once again, very expensive. Then what ends up happening is somebody who remembered my bricks in 2016 is talking to somebody at Walmart, and Walmart has a problem because they want a subway tile looking brick to remodel all their stores. This is their new look and this is what they want. And she connected me with a guy, and I went down to Bentonville, showed him what I had. He said, I love that, but I can't pay the price. Can you dummy it down? So I went back and I started playing with it. And literally in 3 iterations, week after week after week, he and I met. He looked at it. He asked me something. I'd come back. And after the 3rd time, he looked at me and said, that's a winner. Jeffrey, we're going to buy that. And I want you to go see this guy because he's the guy who's going to buy it from you. He's our 3rd-party distributor. I said, great. Thank you very much. And I went and saw that guy, and we started to produce and put that into their stores. And then that same guy, his name's Todd from Walmart, he called me and he said, Jeffrey, I've got something else that we want. He took a picture of some plywood on white thermal, melamine that looked like planks. And he goes, we want this. Can you commercialize this? And I'm like, yeah, let me look at it. Kind of the same thing happened. After about 4 or 5 weeks, came up with a solution for that. Jeffrey, go see Rick. He's going to buy this for you. Then a few more weeks go by, maybe a month. He goes, Jeffrey, we have another program. I want you to look at this. We went with another supplier and it's falling apart and it doesn't work. And, it's a complete disaster. Take a look at it for me. Can you help me? And I look at it and I'm like, what you're doing will not work. And I don't even know how you could even fix what you're doing. We got to start from scratch. Give me some time. Let me see if I can figure something out for you. 2 weeks later, I come down. I say, here's how it works. It's going to hang on the wall. It's with cleats. It's going to look like this. And he looks at it and he goes, let's do a test store. We did a test store. He's like, wow, I really like it. Okay, go see Rick. We're going to buy that now. So long story short, my company went from in 2019, I did about 6.5 million. And in 20, what was it? It'd be actually 20. In 2020, I did 6.5 million. And last year I did 23 million.
Fantastic. What a great story.
At humongous margins because
yep.
It's just it's one of these products that can't, it's not easily replicated, and it's made especially for them and what they do. And so
quick question as we start to wrap up. Patent valuable or not valuable? We know what we got taught in entrepreneur program, right?
Yeah.
But is this a patented product?
So here's my thing on patents, because I looked into it long and hard, and I talked to a lot of people. So, we started with the brick, and that's the one I was going to patent. And what I found was patents are a big company's game. They're very expensive to start.
And police
it's
as
kind
well.
of a crapshoot. So, just your first initial file of patent could cost you maybe 20 to 22. That doesn't seem like a lot. But then the patent office is going to come back to you and tell you this doesn't work and that doesn't work. And it's a fishing game. So now you're going to do it again and again and again. And then there's design patents, there's process patents, and so which patent are you going to do? And as I researched it, the biggest problem is, can you defend the patent? That's right. Where the millions
that's where a lot of money comes in. Absolutely.
And what the guy told me when I talked to several, and I finally talked to a big shot, a guy who was a billionaire, and I didn't talk to him directly, but I talked to somebody knew him and went to him with the product and everything and showed it to him. And what he said was that when you file a patent, there's patent trolls, and what you've done is you just showed the world how to make your product. So anybody can come in now and make your product. You just told them.
Yep.
And can you defend it? And there's a lot of companies out there that have lots of money and know these small guys can't defend it, and they steal it from you immediately. That's their game. That's their business. So what he said to me is, create a brand and hit the market hard and get people using it. Get it out there as fast, as hard.
That's great advice. I think it's great advice. And that's why Coca-Cola has always been a secret recipe.
Yeah.
It's locked in a vault. And the name of the product is?
Hang lock. Because you take these bricks, you take the planks, you take you hang it on the wall, and you lock it in place.
Love it. All right. Last question. We wrap up. What's one piece of advice you would give successors in a family business if they want to be a disruptive successor? And I'm thinking that, just if you haven't thought about the question, that the answer might be around innovation, but what's one piece of advice? Given your experience?
Oh, that's so interesting. I think, innovation is a good one. I'll tell you, my accountant told me, he asked me one day, and he's been with me for 20 years. And he asked me, what is the key to your success? And I told him innovation. He goes, yeah, Jeffrey, you innovate a lot. I agree with you. But you know what your key to success is? Because I've seen it over the years, is cash. I've never seen anybody manage cash and and do so much with so little like you have.
Well, and
I would
that's
say
what
that
you learn from your.
from Stancil, right?
Yep, exactly. You got to feel the cash flow, right?
Feel the
That's
cash
what
flow.
our
So I
finance
think maybe,
professor would say.
that disruptor has to really make
Just,
sure that he's funded, that he has cash, and
yeah.
proves to the elders he can generate value in cash in order to get some trust.
And also that he mines, or she mines, that cash. They know
Correct.
where it's coming from, when it's coming in,
Right.
and they built predictability
Correct.
around that. So, hey, Jeff, this has been a fabulous 45, 50 minutes with you. I love your story. I lived alongside it.
Yes.
I forgot about the 4-year hiatus. I can't imagine what I remember. You were like, I'm not talking to my dad. We're not speaking to each other. You've been through quite a journey, folks. The family business is not always it's not always a smooth sailing experience.
Right.
It could be literally a horror show or experience.
Right.
And there's a lot of difficulty. And so thanks for sharing your real world story with us.
Very welcome, Jonathan. I've enjoyed it too. I tell a lot of people I used to be in a family business, and in order to be successful, I had to get rid of the family.
Okay.
Not everybody has to do that, but sometimes you do.
Yeah. Interesting story. All right, folks, you know the drill. If you like this show, give us a great rating on your listening podcast application of choice. Tell others about it, share it, subscribe, and stay tuned to future episodes. Thanks. This podcast is sponsored by myself, Jonathan Goldhill, and my company, the Goldhill Group, where we provide coaching for growing companies. I'm Jonathan Goldhill, and my purpose is simple: to guide entrepreneurial leaders in family businesses towards more freedom and fulfillment. I want entrepreneurs to get clarity around the changes that will make them and their businesses more successful so they can experience the same freedom I've enjoyed in my life. Our proven practices challenge business owners to think differently about their business and how they're running it, and quite literally become game changers in our clients' companies. Learn more at thegoldhillgroup.com website, where you can schedule your free strategy session.
Thank you for joining us on the Disruptive Successor Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, review, and share with a friend who would benefit from the message. If you're interested in picking up a copy of my book, Disruptive Successor, go to disruptivesuccessor.com.